I want to spend just a couple of minutes really on the PARSHA, and then I want to talk about the holiday that's coming up, which will all fit into our hour. So we begin with Perkudei, so on page 530. And Perkudei begins, Eilet Perkudei Mishkan, Mishkan Eidos Shepoked al Pi Moshe. Right, this is the final accounting of the Mishkan, of the portable temple, and as it was brought before Moshe. What it's telling you basically is that Moshe is required at this point to do an accounting. In other words, he went and made sure that everything was done in the correct way, and now he's going to show everyone that he wasn't skimming. Right? In other words, that he didn't say, I want 50 ounces of gold, and he only put 45 ounces in, and he kept 5 for himself. So you'd say, why would Moshe have to do that? Right? Moshe is the leader of the Jewish people. He brought the Torah down. So Moshe is telling us a message by doing this, which is every person has to be accountable, and there has to be transparency when you're dealing with other people's money, and that charitable causes have to be accountable. So, the final point is that no matter who you are, you have temptation. And if basically you know that nobody's going to check up on you, the temptation is enormous. So Moshe himself decides he wants to make an accounting. So he does. He goes through every single thing that people gave him, and he shows what it was used for, and how there was nothing left over, and that it was all used correctly. So here you have the greatest leader of Jewish history, somebody who we would have to presume is an honest person just because of everything we read about him, and yet he wants us to know that he made an accounting himself at his own. He wasn't commanded to do this. He did this, and then it goes through it all, and it says that all the gold that was used for the work, for all the holy work that offered up gold, was 29 talents, 730 shekels. Right? He tells you exactly how much of everything he got and what he did with it, so that there should never be a question that something was done incorrectly. Now, not only this tells you what I said before, but it also tells you that everything that went into the Mishkan was done honestly. Everything in the temple was honest. In other words, you can imagine if you're going to have a house built and you hire a general contractor to build your house, and he gets all of the other contractors, and he gets all the supplies, and he builds your house. But after it's all done, you find out that he stole the nails. Everything else was paid for. The nails in your house he stole. That doesn't really make a big difference on your house, right? And it's his responsibility. You paid him. You even paid him for the nails, and he just didn't pay the guy. Right? So the Torah is giving us an idea here also that one might not be responsible, but it makes a difference. That we know that through history, many of the people, when they built synagogues and they built other religious institutions, made a point of going way out of their way to make sure that every part of this synagogue that was built, or every part of this mikveh that was built, was done so honestly. Because here you have a building that's purpose is to pray to God, and they didn't pay the person, right, who built it, or they stole the Sidurim, right? Whatever it was, right? It's certainly incongruous in our minds, but it makes a difference. And we learn it from this, that Moshe himself, the last person anybody would ever suspect is going to steal, chose to make an accounting to show that everything in the Mishkan that was done according to Jewish law without any theft. And then, so it goes through enlisting all of the things. So one other point we learn from the beginning here comes from the Medrash. The Medrash says that when the Jewish people were finished everything that was done with the Mishkan, you imagine this is like a large auditorium. I mean, this is a building they built, they made. Right? It doesn't have a lot of rooms, but it's a portable building. Now, after they did all of the parts, they had the gold put on the ark, and they made all the tables, and they made all of the pieces, and they made all the walls, and they did everything. Now it's time to put it together. Right? You have to assemble it, because everything was made separately. So it says that the Jewish people got together to build it, and it was too hard. It was too heavy. They couldn't pick up the walls. They couldn't do it. It's just physically they didn't have the ability to assemble this building that they had made. So it says that they took all of the parts, piece by piece, to Moshe and told Moshe, well, you're going to have to do it. We can't do it. We don't. So it sounds like absurd. If the entire Jewish people, hundreds of thousands of people, are getting together, can't put together the building, how could one man put together a building? So he goes to God and he says to God, what are we supposed to do? So God tells him, put it together. Go ahead, do it. And he does it. So what does that tell us? It doesn't tell us that Moshe was the strongest man in the world. It tells us that anything that we do, that we accomplish in the world, we only accomplish with the help of God. God was saying to Moshe, go ahead. If all the people can't do this because they all wanted to do it themselves, you understand, you can build this with my help. I can make it that you can do it. He said, I'm not trying to show the world that you're the strongest man in the world. I'm trying to show the world that if you want to accomplish something in this world, it takes your effort, your discipline, your work, your creativity. But I'm going to help. And if I help, that makes all the difference. And that's what happened here. Though all of these people could not put the building up because they tried to do it only by themselves. And Moshe said, I'm going to do it, but only with the help of God. And then it was possible. This is in our own lives the same way, that there are tests and there are problems, and sometimes we'll wake up one day or we won't be able to fall to sleep the night before because we have so many problems or so many things are coming and we don't know how we're going to pay a bill, how we're going to fix this, how we're going to deal with a problem with our kids or our spouse or our friends, whatever it is, and we worry about it. Because I see this all the time when people come for counseling. They'll have like 5 different things going on in their lives, and it just messes up their mind. They can't figure out what to do. Like they don't have enough money, and one of their children is acting out, and their car broke down, and their mother is sick. Right? Put them all together, they don't know what to do. Right? So the idea being is that it's trying to tell us that when we have all of these things going on, what we have to do is we have to realize that we need God's help. God will help us with it. We should go. If God says to us, well, I want you to make sure you have to take care of your parents. You have to take care of your children. You have to take care of your family. So, and He doesn't make it possible. How can He do that? How can God go and tell you, I want you to take care of your family, and then He doesn't make it possible for you to take care of your family? And that's not very smart. So here He's saying very clearly that you can do it, but you have to call on me to help you. You pray to me, ask me, I'll be there for you. Because on the one hand, it won't happen without you. On the other hand, you have to know that I have to be there to help also. And when you don't call me to help, I very often help anyways. I'm very often there behind the scenes, making it possible for you. But that's what it teaches us by this story. It's probably, in my opinion, one of the most important messages in this entire PARSHA, that it teaches us that significance. And then it goes through and describes some of the aspects and things that were within the temple itself, or the Mishkan itself, what was in it, how it was done. It tells us about all the different parts, and then at the end, of course, how Moshe goes and puts it all together. One of the other points that it talks about is it keeps talking about these things that when Moshe had to assemble, he had to assemble all of the parts, so he needed things that join things together, right? Like if I have 2 walls and I want to put them up and I want them to be attached, I need nails. So nails join 2 things together. So in the Torah, it talks about these things that were hooks. And their job was they would be like a hook that would hook together like a corner, the 2 walls. Or it would hook together like how we have with a shower curtain on a rod. It would hang like a piece of skin, of leather, to a wall. So they would use these hooks. So these hooks were very important, but they're sort of insignificant. It's sort of like when you build a house, do you really care if they use 3-inch nails or 2.5-inch nails? Yeah, do we even know? Right? So, like we say, same thing with the hooks. What do we care about the hooks? But we see here that they made earlier in the book, and then again here when it refers to them, it says that when they were commanded to build this Mishkan, they were commanded to build it, and they were given different things. They had what you call the building fund. You had to raise the money for everything in the building. You needed gold and silver and copper to make the building. And then they had a fund that they had to raise money for everything within the building, sacrifices, right, consumables. How are you need to have money to buy the animals. They don't just show up. So they had to raise money for that. And then finally they had to raise money for these vavim, these hooks. And that sounds weird, because why don't you just say we're going to raise money for the hooks as part of the building fund? They're for the building, so just throw it in. So God's telling us that you have to realize there's something special about these hooks, that we have to make it unique. I want people to notice them. Not because they'll ever see them, because they're part of the building, but because there's something important about them. What we understand is important of them is the word itself is a vavin. Vavin means the hooks. But what is a vav? A vav is a letter in the alphabet, and it looks like a hook. It's a straight line with a little squiggle on the top, right? That looks like a hook that would grab something. And that's how it gets the name. But what does a vav do? As a letter of the alphabet.
Join.
It's a joiner. It combines two things. You say, I have apples and oranges, and the word and is a vav. So vav, it combines two different things, or two same things together. But this, the Torah is telling us, is extremely important. An object that is used to unite things, to bring things together, is very important. Even if you never see it, even if it appears insignificant, but nevertheless, it's very important. And this is not only in the physical world, but in our lives, when we have to realize how important it is to do things to bring each other together, to become close to each other, to talk to each other, to learn from each other, to get to know each other. This is not an insignificant thing. This is not extra in life. You know, if I have time, I'll make friends. If I have time, I'll get to know people. If I don't have time, I got to work. I got to take care of my family. You have to realize that unity, working with people, unifying with people, getting to know people is extremely important. It's important enough that God made a special fundraising campaign just for these little hooks, so that you should learn this lesson. That something that puts two things together is very, very important. And that's why they're referred to so often here when they seem so insignificant. It'd be like, you could imagine if you're reading Architectural Digest, and it has all these beautiful homes, these 30-bedroom homes in the nicest areas with all kinds of amenities, and it gives you a 3-paragraph description about the nails. You see, that's the most boring thing you could read. Right? I want to see what the kitchen looks like. I want to see, the kind of floors they put in, what kind of paintings are on the walls, what kind of sauna and steam room they put in, and whirlpool bath. What do I care about the nails? Right? They're covered up anyways. But that's what the Torah is telling you, that there's a message to learn from the hooks, that they're very significant, they're very important. Now, interestingly enough, it says that that Moshe did this on the first day of Nisan. That's about a month from now, right? We're in the month of Adar. We're just starting tomorrow. Is the month of Adar. It begins, and then in 1 month is the month of Nisan. And it says that that's when Moshe put this together, and he made it. And then they had to wait a number of months in order to use it, and they inaugurated. That will come up later with the inauguration. But in here it says, if you look on 539, it says it was in the first month of the second year, on the first of the month, that the tabernacle was erected. Moshe erected the tabernacle. He put down its sockets and placed its planks and inserted its bars and erected its pillars. He spread the tent over it. It goes on and on. And so it gives you the date of it. We know that the temple was not actually inaugurated for months after that. He built it and it just sat there unused for months. You think that that's like the most crazy thing. Imagine if you buy a new house, you hire someone to build you a house, and after they finish the house and it's perfect, now you say, okay, I'm moving in 4 months. What are you, crazy? You have this beautiful new house, you're not excited to move into your house today? The guy finishes today, and you're not going to move in today? You're going to wait 4 months and sit around? So there are many messages that one learns from it. Certainly one of them is that the significance of the idea of delayed gratification, of waiting for reward. In other words, you did all the work, and now you have to wait before you use it, before we inaugurate it. And it's an important concept, because our lives are based on this. When we talk about the idea of a person living a good life, you would think that if a person lives a good life, they're going to have a good life. But it's not true. We see all the time people who are kind, who give, who dedicate themselves to others, very often have difficult lives. Very often they die young. Very often they don't have what they need in life. Very often they're lonely or sad or sick. And nevertheless, these are good people. And you'd say, well, isn't this a proof that like being good does you no good? Like, why should I help other people, and I don't even have enough for what I need? And so the answer is that we don't receive reward immediately for what we do in this life. Reward is deferred. It comes later. It's not immediate. A child, for instance, needs an immediate reward. When you have a child, right, and you tell that child, if you go and put away your sneakers, I'll give you a lollipop. They want a lollipop now. They even want the lollipop before they put away their sneakers, right? But if they put away their sneakers, they want it now. And if you don't give it to them now, then you're lying, right? That's just how they see it. Children are very black and white. Problem is that when we grow up, we often stay the same way, right? And the idea of doing the work now and being paid later is hard for people to accept. Yeah, we do it, I work today and I get paid in 2 weeks. That's understood, but it's a constant idea. The idea that when a person lives a good life and doesn't appear to be paid for the good that they do, right? That is right. The question of why do bad things happen to good people is the whole concept of deferred payment. Now you can imagine, for instance, let's say, people will say all the time, look at that person, they give so much charity, they're so kind, and look at the horrible things that happen to them, right? There must be no God. That's what people will say. And I say to them, it's just the opposite. I look at it this way. Let's say, the two guys, or two Jewish guys walk into McDonald's, and they both buy Happy Meals. And they sit down to eat it, and the first guy takes a bite, and he dies. Because he's eating unkosher food. He dies right there. So will the second guy eat that hamburger? No, of course not. You think he won't eat that hamburger because he suddenly became religious? No, he won't eat that hamburger. He doesn't want to die.
Scared to die.
That's right. He doesn't want to die. It's a logical response, right? So does God, by doing that, are we learning anything? Are we growing? Are we becoming more understanding of the world, of how things should be? If you immediately get punished? How about the other way around? I got two guys go to shul in the morning, and one guy puts on his tefillin, right, and he prays, and the other guy just comes and watches, and he sees that when he takes off his tefillin and puts it in a bag, he can't put them in. Why? Because there's now $1 million in his tefillin bag. So he takes out $1 million and puts it in his tefillin. The next day, same thing happens, right? So now it's the third day. Will the other guy put on tefillin that day? Sure, because he believes in God? No, because he wants $1 million, right? That's what happens when you have immediate payment, right? It looks to the world like, see, good things happen to good people. But when people come to me and they say, there can't be a God, look what happens. How can my grandfather was such a wonderful man and he never hurt anybody, he dies like that? And the answer is that it has nothing to do with it. It really doesn't. A person, reward and punishment for what we do in this world is not immediate. If it was, there'd be no purpose for it. There really would be no purpose for us to do mitzvahs if as soon as I put on my tefillin I get $1 million. Everyone will put on tefillin, right? So they get $1 million. Not because they want to do God's will, because they want to make the world a better place, they want to be nice, they want to do the right thing. No, because they want $1 million. So it's the same thing here. They put the cat to the Mishkan would have a positive effect, but nevertheless they had to wait a certain amount of time. It's the same concept. That the waiting it's important that we should realize that you do not have an immediate response to what you do. You have to do it for the right reason, not for the reward. And in order to teach us that, we don't get the reward right away. Right? That's an important message the PARSHA tells us. This PARSHA ends the book of Shemos. If you look on 540, you see at the end of 541, you'll see that they both have like this bold lines. In Hebrew it says chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. With strength you should be strong. That's how we conclude every book of the 5 books of the Torah when we finish reading it, because it's a blessing that we've gone through this much. We now are going to go on further and do more and learn more. We have to understand, what is this book that we're reading? The Torah is a manual of life. It's like, people sometimes say there's no instruction manual for parents. You have all these parents can mess up their kids because there's no instruction manual for parents. Everybody has to learn themselves. But there is an instruction manual for life, and that's the Torah. The Torah tells you, right, certain traits, certain things, certain actions that we should do in order so that life should be good for everyone. And therefore it's a manual for life. So every time we finish a section, we say, we should be strong and continue, do more. But we have been strong and we will be strong, and that's what we say when we finish the book. And that section finishes the book. What we've done now in finishing the book of Shemos, if you remember when we first started it, I said that the book of Genesis, or Bereshit, is a book that talks about the creation of the world and the foundation of everything that we needed in the world. And the book of Shemos is now the creation of the Jewish people, or I say the creation of the Jewish nation. Right? That's what happens. That's ending here. So now the Jewish people are a reality. They went through Egypt. They come out of Egypt. You have all of the miracles. They received the Torah. That's the starting point now. Now the Jewish nation is in the world to bring the world to become an ethical place, and we have now the book to do it. And now we go on we have the temple, we have everything ready, and we end this book. We're going to now talk about what our preparation for us to be able to go into the world and make the world a better place. That begins in the next chapter, which starts the third book of the Torah, the book of Vayikra, which is called the book of the Kohanim, because it deals very, very deeply with a lot of the aspects of the temple itself. What happens in the temple and why, and the enormous role that the temple, here it's the traveling temple, but later it's the real temple, it plays in our life, right? And how much it assists us. So we'll conclude that part there, and then I want to spend some time discussing a bit about Purim. So, Purim is a rabbinic holiday. That is, you're not going to find Purim in the Torah. It's just like you don't find Hanukkah in the Torah. You might find a hint to it, but you won't actually find it, because the Torah was given, and it was a long time later that the holiday of Purim came. The holiday of Purim came, there were still prophets in the world, and Esther was a prophet. And Esther, when they got together and she wrote the book, what we call the Megillah of Esther, it's not the book known as the Megillah about Esther, it's the Megillah written by Esther, and it happens to be about her and others, but she writes it. She's an example of a female prophet, of which we had many in Jewish history, and we certainly had many female heroines, right? People who saved the Jewish people. She was one. But there's a very interesting point I want to show you with some of the depth of what goes on with Purim. We have many players in the story, and one of the rules that we learn, the Talmud tells us, is that anything you want to know, you can find in the Torah. You just have to know how to look. The Torah has in it the entire future. You just have to know how to look for it. So they say, the Talmud says, "Oh, is that right? So then show me. Where is Haman in the Torah? And where is Mordechai in the Torah?" Right? And much later, where are they? Where are they found in the Torah? So it says Haman is found in the Torah because if you look in the first PARSHA of Bereshit, it talks a story about the tree, the forbidden tree that you can't eat from. And the Hebrew word is Hamin ha'etz, the type of tree. And Hamin is Haman. Remember, the Torah has no vowels. So the same word, Hamin, would spell Haman. So it says, that's where he is. He's in the Torah. He's there. Now, what that means doesn't seem to make any sense. Right? Haman is a villain, a horrible, terrible person. And where is he in the Torah? Talking about a tree. Okay? It says, all right, so you're so smart. Where's Mordechai in the Torah? And it says back in the Talmud, that's not hard either. It says, later on, when we are in the next book, it talks about the spices that are used in the temple. They used to burn spices, and they make it like incense, so that there'd be a fragrance within the temple, not just for the people, but it said it was a fragrance that God wanted there. So one of the spices was called mortaror. Mortaror, right, is an Aramaic word of which, if you would translate Mordechai, it would be mortaror. So it says, there's Mordechai in the Torah. He's a spice. Spice. Well, what's that got to do with the story? And then it says, all right, you gave us two words that make no sense, but how about here's another one. See, you can tell us this. How about Esther? Where's Esther in the Torah? Right? So it says, well, in the Megillah it tells us that Esther's name, it says Esther he Hadassah. Esther's name was Hadassah. Her name was Esther and Hadassah. One probably meaning that one was a Hebrew word, Hadassah, and one was a Persian word, Esther. And it's become a Hebrew word now, but it very well could be. So it says, and where do you find that in the Torah? Well, it talks about hadassim are one of the 4 species you put on your lulav and esrog, right? There's 4 species. You have a lulav and an esrog, and you have a willow, and then you have these hadassim, which are a fragrant branch, right? That comes, that you have to add. It's one of the 4 species. So there you got it. You've got the people. They're all in the Torah. You see, the Talmud says we were right, but it doesn't seem to make any sense. And what does it have to do with the Purim story? Right? You're playing with words. You put 2 words together and you get Haman. You take another language and you tell me that means Mordechai. You take Esther and you say, no, we don't mean the name Esther, we mean the name Hadassah, and we find that in the Torah about the holiday of Sukkot. Well, thank you very much. None of this. It seems like you're just sort of pushing it, right? So here's how we can understand this. The Talmud is not pushing it. The Talmud is telling you a deep secret about the whole story of the story of Purim. If you look in the first chapter of the Torah, we know that what happens there is that the Adam and Eve are put into the Garden of Eden, and they're told your life is going to be perfect here. You're going to have a close relationship with God, and you're going to have a wonderful life here. And the only rule you have is you can't eat from this tree, right? So if you look closely, when they do sin, it talks about what happens, and it says that Chava, Eve, saw the fruit, right? It says that she took it, she touched it, right? She ate it. It says that she listened to the snake who told her to do this, right? So if you look at it, if a human being has 5 senses, right? 4 out of 5 senses were involved in this, right? She tasted it, she touched it, she saw it, and she heard the snake's words. Nowhere does it talk about the sense of smell, that she smelled it, that anything to do with fragrance was involved. So what we learn from this is that Adam and Eve, through this story, corrupted 4 out of 5 human senses. 4 or 5 human senses were involved in a sin right in the beginning of the story. The 5th one, the sense of smell, was not. We can see this in our own lives because the sense of smell is extremely powerful. You can be standing somewhere and you can smell a perfume, and it'll bring back memories to you that you don't even know you have. It'll take you back to your childhood, just a fragrance. Or you want to see how powerful it is. It used to be in the mall here, and I read an article about this, but in the mall here they used to have a place called Cinnamons, right? And they made these cinnamon rolls, right? So there's certain rules that this franchise requires when you buy a franchise of this Cinnamons place. Number 1, it has to be near the escalator. You have to make it near the escalator. And it has to be upstairs near the escalator. Number 2, you don't have the ability to bake these there, but you do have to have a certain aerosol that they provide. And this aerosol smells like baking cookies. That's what it smells like. And what they do is that they constantly send out this fragrance from this franchise in the mall, and they had it here in the promenade. As you're going up the escalator, you start smelling this. By the time you get to the top of the escalator, but you're stuck on the escalator, you can't go any other place. You get to the top, you've been smelling this fragrance for a while. Subconsciously or consciously, you're going to start to have an interest in eating one of these buns. As soon as you get to the top, you see, right, the place that sells the buns. So what are they doing? Now, it's not just them. A lot of places, the cookie, some of the chocolate chip cookie places do this. If you look, they don't have the ability to bake. They're not baking them. They have the ability to warm them, but they get them pre-made, right? They're not made there. But you feel like you're getting this freshly baked bun, and you want to eat it. Why is that? Because the sense of smell is so strong. It brings back maybe memories of childhood. It makes you think when you were a kid and your mother used to make these things. Right? It might best be that it causes you to do something that you wouldn't normally have done. You're on a diet, and now you're smelling that. That kills your diet. How about when you want to buy a house? They have people who not only they sell your house, but there are people that will set your house. That is, they come in and they set up your house for an open house. So they'll do all kinds of things. But one thing that they will often suggest is that right before you leave the house for the open house, you should take a pan and you should cook butter in the pan. Just warm butter up. That's it. Don't use the butter. Don't do anything. Just warm the butter up. And it makes a fragrance, right? Warm butter, right? And what is it about? It's cooking, baking, right? But when? Today people don't use butter. When you were a kid, they did. So you walk in, what is the goal of that person? They want you to see that house. They don't want you to see a house. They want you to see a home. They want you to buy this house because you feel it's your home. So how do they do that? One of the things they do is they make it a fragrance that reminds you from when you were a kid in your home. So now you're looking at this house totally differently, all because of that fragrance. So you see how powerful fragrances are. One of the reasons it's powerful is because in a Kabbalistic level, in a mystical level, it was not corrupted at the same time that the other senses were corrupted. So now let's look back at the names that we had. All the names of the people that we talked about are all spices. They're all fragrances. Haman was on a fragrant tree, from the tree. Mordechai was a spice. Esther is Hadassah. Hadassim are the one, we talk about every year, and that the lulav, one part of it has no taste and no smell. One has taste and smell, that's the esrog. There's one that has smell and no taste, that's the Hadassim. The Hadassim have a very strong fragrance. It smells like the outdoors, when you smell it, like an evergreen tree. That is what Esther was. Right? So what we've got is Haman, Esther, and Mordechai are all fragrances. Right? And those were the only things that were not corrupted in the Garden of Eden. So what was Esther's goal? What happens? The Talmud says that what happens in the story of Esther is that the Jews go back to the level that they were on before the first sin, before the original sin that happened in the garden. Right? They go to that high spiritual level, and they at that point accept the Torah again. On a much deeper level than they did at Sinai when we were all gathered around the mountain, and it was Esther who causes this. Right? It was Esther's efforts. So here we see the depth of it based on the fragrance. That is to say that there was this Kabbalistic thing went on that the Talmud is telling you is not trying to tell you a story of how you can find Haman in the Torah. They know. They're playing around with the words, but they're telling you that the fragrance, that this concept of what they were using was that Esther was able to use her efforts to bring the Jewish people to a level of unity and a level of working together with God in order to save the Jewish people, just like it was before the sin in the Garden of Eden. And therefore you see all of these references in the story of Esther. And it's one of the ideas that makes it so remarkable, because the story of Esther, the Purim story, takes the entire idea of the Jewish people who are getting further and further away from Jewish life, and it brings them right back all at one time. Because what is happening in the story of the Megillah is the Jews are assimilating. The first temple was destroyed. We were sent out of Israel. Right? God sent us out of Israel. We're now living among the non-Jews. And where? In the empire, the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire is 127 countries. It's the largest empire in the world. It's running the entire known world at the time. And the Jews are living in all 127 countries. Right? And they're starting to assimilate. And they're starting to intermarry. And they're starting to give up Judaism. And they're starting to think, we lost. God sent us out of Israel. We were sinning. He destroyed the temple. We are now with the non-Jews. It's over. The job of the Jewish people is finished. We're gone. We're not going to live anymore. We're going to assimilate. We're going to disappear. And that's what was happening. And the Jews gave up all hope of ever going back to Israel. And Achashverosh, the king, realizes this. And he capitalizes on this. And he says, now, the Jews are good in my country. They're good for my economy. They do a lot of good stuff for me. But as long as they stay here. As soon as they want to go back to Israel, it's bad for me. So I want to keep them here. So what does he do? He sees that they're having this feeling where they're of despair. We're never going back, and they start to assimilate and intermarry. So Achashverosh throws a party, and he throws a party, and he shows up at the party wearing the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest, that he wore in the temple, and the Jewish people should be shocked. They'd be shocked. Can you imagine, like all have you got like all the priests from the Catholic Church to be invited to like, let's say, to go meet Trudeau, right, in Ottawa, and he shows up dressed up like the Pope. Can you imagine? He gets the Pope's outfit, he puts it on, and he shows up. Do you think they'll be happy with him? That they would say, "Oh, that's so nice," right? They would be insulted, and they would be violently insulted, and they'd have reason to be, because how do you do such a thing like that? He's a symbol of our religion, and you're making fun of him, and you're right, and that's what happened. Achashverosh dresses up in the clothes of the high priest, and they didn't care. Nobody fought. Nobody got upset. They stayed at the party. They enjoyed themselves. They had a great time, and everybody went home. And that was the symbol that showed us that the Jews had given up. It was finished. There was no longer a reason to continue. They were done. The moral job of the Jews to make the world a better place, we failed. And we're done, and there's nothing we can do about it. And along comes Esther, right, through this whole story, and Esther develops a way to unite the Jewish people, to bring back their Jewish pride, to bring them back to the level where they saw that they had a purpose and a meaning, and to accomplish it. And that's exactly what she does. And she does it, and it's hinted at that she brings us back to the level we were, right, in the Garden of Eden, the highest possible level a human being can be at. And she accomplishes that. From being the lowest level, where we're assimilating, we're marrying non-Jews, we're acting inappropriately, and so forth, well, all the way till we reach, to the highest possible level. And that was Esther's doing at this time. She accomplished this on Purim. Right? That's what is so significant about Purim. And there are many things, but that's one of them. And then she wants this to come home to us. Because what is the mitzvahs that, the mitzvahs of Purim that we have, Esther commands us. It's in the Megillah, and Esther writes the Megillah. So Esther is telling us, right, this woman, this prophet, woman prophet who writes this book is telling you, you need to not only know what happened, but you have to live with now the results of how we're reinvigorated. But I want you to constantly remind yourselves every year and relive it. So how do we do that? So you'll notice that, what are the mitzvahs of the day of Purim? Mitzvah 1, send gifts to your friends. Right? Send gifts to your friends, right? That's what we were talking about before, right? You find other Jewish people that you're friends with, send them a gift of food. That's a mitzvah. I say that's a religious thing to do. Yeah. What's the goal? The goal is everyone should be united and care for each other. Because in the story of Esther, when Esther shows up, it says that Haman goes to Achashverosh and he says, there's a nation among us that is split up and separated among 127 provinces. That's the Jews. But the words, they're split up and separated, Esther understands that to mean they're fighting with each other. They're split between each other. They're separated from each other. The Jews are not getting along with each other. Therefore, Esther says the first thing we have to do in order to stay on a high spiritual level is we got to get along with each other. So mitzvah number 1, send gifts of food to your friends. What happens when you do that? Well, how do you feel when somebody sends you, people know you like a certain bottle of wine, or you like turkey, whatever it is, and somebody sends that to you, already prepared, ready to eat, ready to drink, 100%. What do? You're happy, and you thank them. It brings you close, right? So that's what you do. What's the other thing we do? The next thing is that you have to give money to the poor, so that the poor can celebrate Purim the same way you do. That they can have money for food, money for gifts, money for everything that they need on that day, and you are obligated to see that they have it. So every Jew is obligated to see that a poor Jew has enough money for food to have a celebration that day. I don't say that they have to have enough money just for food. They have to have a celebration, right? It's not like you say, well, they could go over here to this kosher hamburger place and they could get a meal for $6. So I'm going to give them $6. But that's not the idea. We don't want them to have a meal for $6. We want them to have a meal for $200. We want them to have, just like you're going to have a meal for $200, they should have one too. So everybody has to give money for the poor to be able to do that. And we do it. We make a collection here every year. Everyone's obligated to give. They're not obligated by me. They're obligated by the Megillah that they have to give. And people give. And on Purim, I distribute the money to the people of need, who really need it in our community. And they're able to buy food. They're able to buy other things. And what's the reason? So the Rambam says, how is it possible? He says, well, he puts it this way. If you are making a holiday meal and you don't have poor people at your table, then you don't have a holiday meal. That's called filling your stomach. If you want to have a holiday meal, you have to have poor people at your table. Same idea. If they're not at your table, you have to make it possible that poor people can also celebrate. Right? Otherwise, what are you doing? There's no holiday celebration that you have enough money, God gave you enough money that your family can have a big party for Purim, but all the people around you are starving. Right? That's not how you do it. You can't celebrate a holiday unless everybody can celebrate. So now you have to give money to them. What does that do? It unites us. It brings us closer together again. Right? That's the idea. Right? The other mitzvah is that you have to have the meal, and at the meal you're supposed to drink. It doesn't mean you get dead drunk. It doesn't mean you get sloppy drunk. It means you drink enough that it lowers your inhibitions. That you're friendly, you're fun, you enjoy yourself, you're with people, you're not looking at people and judging them. He's a bum, I don't need this guy in my house. This one insulted me last week. No, everybody's great. You know how people have a drink, they start, oh, I love everybody. They start kissing everybody, right? That feeling that you get, you have to have that in Purim. So every mitzvah that she told us that we have to have on Purim is for the purpose of uniting us together with each other. That's the whole purpose. What appears to be a holiday that has a number of mitzvahs that seems to be, this is just like eat till you can't eat anymore, drink until you fall asleep. Like, what kind of a holiday is that? Well, it happens to be a very important holiday. And a holiday's purpose is not so that you should eat and drink and get drunk, is that everyone should eat, drink, and get a little bit drunk. Everyone, not just you, everyone. And you have to make it possible. Right? And every one of us makes it possible. And that's how we celebrate it, by uniting together. And that was Esther's message to us, that we have to do that. We have to unite together in order to celebrate it. And that's why some of the commentaries tell us that, we know that Yom Kippur is a very holy day. And I mean, who doesn't know that? You dress in white, you go to the synagogue, you don't eat, you don't have relations, you don't mess around with people, you pray and you pray and you pray and you pray, and you feel spiritual. But they have a play on words. They say Yom Kippurim, that's the name of it, Yom Kippurim, the Day of Atonement, can actually be understood differently, which is Yom Kippurim, which means a day like Purim. Yeah. Right? And anything that is like something else is not as good as the thing it's like. Right? I'm going to sell you a car for half the price of a Cadillac, but it's as good as a Cadillac. Right? It's not really as good as a Cadillac. It's like the Cadillac. It's a little bit less. Right? But you don't care. It's close enough. Yom Kippur is a day like Purim. You say, what is that? Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, is a day like Purim. Purim, you run around like a drunk. You run around in funny clothes. You run around giving gifts to people. That's holier than Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is almost as holy as Purim? That's backwards. But it's not backwards. Everybody knows that in Yom Kippur you feel holy. It's easy. If you fast and you pray all day, you'll feel holy. I promise you. You'll feel close to God. But if you eat and drink and run around in funny clothes and make yourself and you feel holy, then that takes effort. That's hard to do. I always use this idea, but it works here very well. If you want to lose weight, there's two ways to lose weight. One way is called the starvation diet, and one way is using these other diets. There's no question, I can tell you from personal experience my entire life, that losing weight with a starvation diet is the most effective and fastest way to lose weight. If you eat 100 calories a day, you will lose weight, and you'll lose weight fast. And in a week, you'll lose 10 pounds. And in 2 weeks, you'll lose 18, 20 pounds. And in a month, you could lose like an enormous amount of weight, right? The problem with it is that sooner or later you have to eat. And when you do, what's the first thing you'll eat? It's what you shouldn't eat. Why? Because you starved yourself. And now you're going to gain back everything plus more in the same amount of time that you lost it. So what's the other way? The other way is not as good. The other way is to go to like one of these places that teach you to eat differently. Weight Watchers, Diet Workshop, pick your one, whatever one you want. They all do the same thing in a different way. They teach you to eat correctly. And what happens when you eat correctly? You lose weight, but not very much. A half pound this week, pound next week. But over the course of a year, you'll lose 20 pounds. Over 2 years, 35 pounds. But you never stop because you've retrained yourself of how you eat. Right? So to put that whole story into one line, it's much easier to not come to the table when where the food is than it is to come to the table and eat correctly. Much easier. It's much more effective also to not come to the table, right? But it doesn't last. So it's the same thing here. Yom Kippur is a starvation diet. You're not going to eat on Yom Kippur. You're going to pray all day on Yom Kippur. You're not going to have a fight with your neighbor because you're not going to talk to your neighbor. You're not going to do something you shouldn't do because you're in shul a whole day praying. So of course you're going to be holy, right? But But after Yom Kippur's over, you're going to go back to normal life. How are you going to act? You're going to go back the way you were, right? If on Purim we say, eat, go ahead, eat, have a meal, but eat in a godly way. Eat with discretion. Eat with discipline. Eat with poor people. Eat when other people can eat. But have a drink, but don't get dead drunk. Get a little happy. Nothing wrong with that. That's the idea. It's much harder to be spiritual on Purim than it is on Yom Kippur, but it's much greater. That's why Yom Kippur is like Purim, because Purim in that way is much more difficult, but the effect of it stays with you. That's what Esther did for us. Esther took the Jews who gave up all hope. We were done. There would be no more Jewish people in 2 generations. And she brought us back and gave us hope and inspiration and changed everybody, right? Woke us all up. And she wants us to remember that by keeping us united, keeping us involved with the physical world in a disciplined way. And it's very hard to do, but it's very important to do. And that's why Purim is also one holiday that lots of people don't keep. Lots of people, go to work, it'll be a regular day for them, maybe they'll go read the Megillah, but they'll be basically a regular day, because they lose out on what it is that it really is. They think, oh, Yom Kippur, I wouldn't work on Yom Kippur, I gotta fast on Yom Kippur, right? But they don't realize the amazing effect eating on Purim has for you. Making that when you make sure that poor people have food on Yom Kippur, on Purim, that has an enormous effect on you. The fact that you enjoy yourself and you've got a poor person at your table, or you have your friends with you, and you send them gifts, and they send you gifts, and everybody, you open your door, and there's 20 people there with things of food, and you give out food to other people, and this guy, it's always something funny or different. Like one year we gave pizza and beer. My wife and I gave everyone pizza and beer. One year we gave challah and grape juice, so you could have for Shabbos. We had all different types of things you do. People will make, sculptures out of food. They'll deliver it in all kinds of themes and ideas and fun stuff. And you talk about it, and they'll give you a bottle of wine with a coat on or something, or they'll dress up in a costume and come to your house and act crazy and give you something. That's Purim. Right? And what the effect of it is, by the end of the day, if you're doing it right, everybody loves each other. We're all united. And it won't last, but it gives you the first step. And if you really try, it might last. You might be able to keep it. That's what Purim teaches us. And that's why it all works in the way it does. And one of the important things to remember was Esther. Of course God did it, but Esther was the catalyst. Right? And it's always been the truth that it was women throughout Jewish history who are the ones who saved the Jews. And you have it over and over and over again, but Esther is one of the most obvious ones. that she really did everything. She was the one who did not give up hope, did not allow things to happen, put her life on the line. She went to the king and told him who she was and what was going to be, and she could have been killed. Right? He could have killed her, and she stood up for us, and because of that, right, we're here today.